My narcissistic mom tried to steal my boyfriends. She thought I didn't deserve them. My mother flirted with every man I brought home, then acted as though I was imagining it. The lingering hugs were friendliness, the private messages were motherly concern, and every intimate compliment was supposedly harmless. By 24, I had watched the pattern destroy relationship after relationship. She wanted proof that any man who chose me could still be pulled toward her. After 6 years of failed confrontations, I finally gave her a situation she could not explain away. I introduced her to a boyfriend who was not really my boyfriend at all. My name is Natalie, and my mother, Vanessa, was 52 when all of this happened. She had modeled professionally in her 20s and had built most of her identity around being the most beautiful woman in any room. Even decades later, she still spent hours on her hair and makeup, trained with a personal coach 5 days a week, and owned a wardrobe that probably cost more than some people's homes. With my mother, beauty was not merely something she enjoyed, it was power. She needed admiration and treated any man's interest in me as a challenge. She would compliment him too intensely, touch him too often, laugh at ordinary jokes, then tell me he was not good enough. Eventually, I understood the pattern, prove she could attract him, then persuade me to discard him before he could reject her. The relationship that finally broke me was with a man named Owen. He was kind, steady, and sincere. He taught at an elementary school near my apartment and had no interest in emotional games. We had been dating for about 4 months when I invited him to Sunday dinner at my mother's house. I had delayed the introduction because I knew how she behaved, but Owen had begun wondering why I kept him away from my family. I did not want him to think I was ashamed, so I told myself this time might be different. The moment she opened the door, I knew I had been foolish. Her eyes moved over him with the quick, assessing look I had seen many times before. Then she smiled, pulled him into a hug that lasted several seconds too long, and said, "Natalie, you never told me he was this handsome." Owen gave me a brief, uncertain glance, but he was too polite to react. During dinner, my mother asked about his job, his family, his hobbies, and his plans for the future. The questions sounded normal, but the performance did not. She leaned toward him, touched his forearm, and treated every comment as brilliant. When I went into the kitchen to get dessert, she used the opportunity to speak about me as if I were not there. I heard her tell him, "Natalie almost never brings anyone home." I was beginning to worry she would never find someone good enough. By the time I returned with the pie, Owen looked uncomfortable, while my mother looked energized. After he left, she cornered me in the hallway and lowered her voice into the falsely gentle tone she used before saying something cruel. "He seems nice, sweetheart," she said. "Maybe a little simple for you, though. An elementary school teacher? You could probably do better." That was her usual sequence. Test whether a boyfriend responded, plant doubts about him, then find a reason to contact him privately. She might ask for gift advice, request help moving something, or claim she needed to discuss my happiness. Gradually, she positioned herself as the concerned mother who understood him better than I did. My previous 3 boyfriends had all become confused and exhausted by the dynamic. None of them had openly accused her of trying to interfere. They simply began withdrawing until the relationship faded. Owen was the first person who showed me exactly what was happening. 2 weeks after dinner, we were sitting in his living room when he said, "Your mother has been texting me." His expression was not amused or flattered. He looked genuinely troubled. He handed me his phone. The messages began innocently. Questions about his week, an article about teaching, and a yoga class she thought he might enjoy. Then she suggested coffee so she could make sure he was treating me well. Every message was framed as concern, giving her plausible deniability if either of us objected. Owen watched me scroll through the conversation and said, "She claims she only wants to make sure I'm treating you right, but some of this feels inappropriate." My stomach sank because I could see the same pattern happening again, this time in writing. I told him the truth. "It is inappropriate, and I'm sorry." This is why I usually avoid introducing anyone to her. When he asked whether it had happened before, I admitted that it happened every time. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Natalie, you know this isn't normal, right?" I did know. The problem was that recognizing manipulation did not automatically give me the power to stop it. Whenever I confronted her, she reversed the accusation. I was insecure, controlling, or dating men too immature to deserve me. 3 days after showing me the messages, Owen ended our relationship. He told me he cared about me, but he could not live inside a situation where my mother constantly contacted him, watched him, and made comments about our relationship. He did not blame me, which made it hurt more. I cried for hours because I had lost a good man, and finally saw the future waiting for me. Every relationship would have to survive my mother's need to compete. That was when I came up with the fake boyfriend plan. I needed someone who understood performance, recognized manipulation, and could not be seduced or intimidated. He had to attract her attention without becoming part of the damage. Then, I remembered Adrian, an old college friend I had not seen in years. Adrian had studied theater and wanted to become an actor. He was tall, dark-haired, green-eyed, charming, and deeply impatient with manipulators. He was also gay. He had not been open about it when we were in college, but after graduation he had come out to his family and later moved in with his boyfriend, Daniel. We still followed each other online, and from what I could see, he had become even more self-assured than he had been at school. I sent him a message explaining everything, expecting him to tell me the idea was unhealthy or ridiculous. Instead, he replied almost immediately. "This may be the most entertaining request I've received in months," he wrote. "Daniel is going to love it. When do we begin?" We met for coffee the following weekend. Adrian listened as I described the dinners, private texts, and blame that followed every breakup. When I finished, he asked, "What exactly are we trying to accomplish? Do you want her to back off, or are you looking for revenge?" I told him I did not want to destroy her. I wanted her to stop destroying my relationships. I hoped that focusing on him would keep her away from my real dating life. Adrian said the plan would work only if he encouraged her just enough to expose herself without actually pursuing her. We created a simple backstory. We had reconnected through mutual friends, had been dating for 2 months, and were beginning to take the relationship seriously. Adrian would be attentive to me, but not excessively affectionate. He would seem successful, value her opinions, and remain charming enough to make her believe she could draw him away from me. "The key," he explained, "is that she has to feel she's competing with you. She won't care about me because of who I am. She'll care because she thinks you have something she can take." The explanation made me feel sick, but he was right. She could not tolerate someone choosing me without also wanting her. We agreed that Adrian would show me every message she sent, and that neither of us would improvise anything that could create real emotional or legal trouble. Daniel knew about the plan and found it both horrifying and hilarious. 2 weeks later, I brought Adrian to my mother's house for dinner. She answered in a new dress, perfect hair, and formal makeup. She looked at Adrian, and I could almost see the calculation begin. "You must be Adrian," she said, extending her hand with theatrical elegance. "Natalie has told me so much about you." Adrian gave her his most convincing smile. "Only good things, I hope," he said. "And you must be Vanessa." Natalie definitely failed to mention how beautiful her mother is. My mother practically melted. She laughed like a teenager, touched his arm, and invited us inside with a warmth she rarely showed when I arrived alone. Adrian handled the dinner perfectly. He asked about her modeling career, complimented the food, and listened with convincing interest as she told stories I had heard hundreds of times. At the same time, he kept one hand on my knee under the table and drew me back into the conversation whenever my mother tried to exclude me. At one point, he said, "Natalie is lucky to have such an interesting mother. I can see where she gets her confidence." My mother immediately corrected him. "Oh, Natalie has always been terribly shy. I keep telling her she needs to put herself out there more." Adrian squeezed my hand and replied, "I think she's exactly right as she is. But I would love to hear more about your modeling years. That must have been quite an experience." He defended me, then redirected the spotlight toward her. She spent the next hour glowing. After dinner, I loaded the dishwasher while they talked in the living room. Adrian asked about her workout routine and skincare regimen, and she told him about her personal trainer, her diet, and the effort required to remain youthful. He remarked that she looked at least 10 years younger than her age. She answered, "Natalie is fortunate to have someone who appreciates quality." Adrian said, "I definitely appreciate quality," with just enough warmth to keep her interested without promising anything. When we left, she hugged him tightly and told him he was welcome in her home anytime. In the car, I said, "She likes you." Adrian replied, "She has already imagined the affair." "Did you see her face when I complimented her dress?" I called it disgusting, but he reminded me that I could now watch the pattern from the outside instead of questioning myself. Within days, my mother began texting him. The first messages were ordinary, questions about work, links to articles, and comments about things they had discussed over dinner. Adrian showed me everything and kept his replies friendly but restrained. He thanked her, answered direct questions, and occasionally complimented her taste, but he never flirted openly or suggested meeting her alone. His restraint let her interpret politeness as hidden interest, while feeling she had not fully won him. Meanwhile, her behavior toward me changed. When Adrian was present, she became unusually supportive. She stopped criticizing me, listened when I spoke, and performed the role of a generous mother. Adrian recognized it immediately. "She's performing for me," he said. "She wants me to believe she's emotionally mature and supportive, because she thinks that makes her more desirable. For a few weeks, the plan worked smoothly. My mother's energy was directed toward impressing Adrian, and because he continually brought the conversation back to me, she had less room to undermine me. Then she began escalating. She started dropping by my apartment when she knew he would be there, usually with groceries I had not requested, homemade food, or some small gift chosen specifically for him. She always arrived dressed for attention and claimed she was nearby. During one visit, she stayed for 2 hours, talking about how worried she was that I did not eat enough. Afterward, Adrian told me she had brought him homemade cookies and repeatedly asked whether he thought I was taking care of myself. "What did you say?" I asked. "I told her I was making sure you were well cared for," he replied. She didn't like that answer. Each attempted alliance ended with Adrian reaffirming his loyalty to me, and her frustration showed. 6 weeks into the fake relationship, my mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon and began crying. Her voice shook as she said, "Natalie, I need to tell you something. I think I'm falling in love with Adrian." For a moment, I could not speak. Hearing my mother declare love for the man she believed was my boyfriend was worse than I had imagined. I asked what she was talking about, and she said she knew it was wrong, but could not control how she felt. According to her, Adrian understood her in a way most men did not. I reminded her that she had known him for only 6 weeks. She answered, "Sometimes that's all it takes." Then she claimed Adrian loved her too, and stayed with me, only to avoid hurting me. I went silent long enough that she asked whether I was still on the phone. When I said yes, she continued in the calm, reasonable tone she used when presenting something outrageous as maturity. "Maybe the three of us should sit down and discuss this like adults. If we're honest about our feelings, we can decide what is best for everyone." She wanted me to discuss surrendering my boyfriend to my own mother. I ended the call without agreeing to anything, then contacted Adrian and told him what had happened. He sounded delighted. "She wants a formal discussion about feelings? This is perfect." I told him it was not perfect, it was a nightmare, and she had completely lost her sense of reality. Adrian disagreed. He said she was finally willing to expose what she had done for years. "Now," he said, "we can show her what this behavior looks like when she can't rewrite it." He asked me to arrange the conversation at my apartment that weekend and promised he had a plan. I was nervous because embarrassment made my mother volatile, but avoiding the confrontation would only let her create another story. Adrian arrived an hour before she did, so we could review what he intended to say. He would let her state her feelings, make it clear that he had never promised her anything, and then reveal the truth about our arrangement. I disliked humiliating her, but no one had forced her to send messages, visit my apartment, or claim my partner preferred her. The confrontation would only expose choices she had already made. My mother arrived Saturday evening wearing a tight black dress, full makeup, and carefully styled hair. She carried an expensive bottle of wine and looked nervous in a way that was almost hopeful. Adrian stood to hug her and said, "Vanessa, you look stunning." She practically purred as she thanked him and told him he looked handsome. The three of us sat in the living room in an awkward triangle. My mother kept looking between Adrian and me, trying to determine whether he had already chosen a side. Finally, she said, "I think we all understand why we're here." Adrian nodded and told her he appreciated her honesty. "It takes courage to admit your feelings," he said. Her face brightened immediately. She told him she had been afraid he would think she was a terrible person. He answered that the conversation was long overdue, then reached over and took my hand. The gesture confused her, but hope kept her listening. Adrian began carefully. "Vanessa, you are an extraordinary woman. You're beautiful, intelligent, and sophisticated. Any man would be flattered by your attention." My mother glowed and leaned forward. Then he continued, "But I am completely, unquestionably in love with Natalie." Her expression collapsed. Before she could interrupt, he added, "And I'm gay." The room went silent. My mother stared before asking what he meant. Adrian explained that he had been gay his entire life and had been in a committed relationship with Daniel for 3 years. He told her we had never dated. I had asked him to pretend because I was tired of losing relationships to her interference. My mother looked from him to me as confusion turned into humiliation and then rage. "This is a joke," she said. Adrian told her it was not. He explained that I had turned to him because every serious boyfriend I introduced to her received inappropriate attention, private messages, and pressure. His calmness made her angrier. She accused us of lying to her for 2 months. Adrian answered, "You have been lying to yourself for years. Do you honestly believe it is normal to compete with your own daughter for male attention? Do you think sabotaging her relationships is harmless simply because you call it concern?" My mother stood abruptly and said she did not have to listen. Adrian agreed that she could leave, but told her she might benefit from hearing why the situation had reached that point. She turned toward me with genuine hurt on her face. "How could you do this to me?" she asked. I repeated the question, then told her exactly what she had done. Since I was 18, she had flirted with every man I dated, contacted them privately, undermined me, and made them feel guilty for choosing me instead of giving her attention. She had sabotaged 6 years of my dating life. She denied sabotaging anything. According to her, if those men could not tolerate a little friendliness from my mother, they had not been good enough for me. Adrian laughed once, without humor, and said, "Friendliness? You invited me to meet you for coffee 3 times. You sent me photographs from your yoga sessions. You told me Natalie and I might both be settling." My mother's face went pale. She denied sending anything inappropriate, so Adrian opened his phone and showed her the conversation. The dated photographs showed her in sports bras and tight leggings, discussing how exercise kept her young. She protested that they were not nude and therefore did not count as inappropriate. Adrian responded gently but firmly. "No one said they were nude. The point is that you sent suggestive photographs to the man you believed was your daughter's boyfriend. You are a beautiful woman, Vanessa, but you are also old enough to be my mother. This isn't flattering. It's sad." That ended her self-control. She began screaming that we had humiliated her and made her look foolish. She said she would never forgive either of us. Then she grabbed the wine bottle and threw it against the wall. Glass shattered, wine splashed across the paint, and my neighbor's dog began barking through the wall. She called me an ungrateful daughter and accused Adrian of being a pervert who had deliberately led her on. He reminded her that he had never pursued her or expressed romantic interest. She ignored him, announced that she was leaving, and told me not to expect contact until I learned how to respect my mother. Then she stormed out and slammed the door hard enough to shake the frame. Adrian and I sat in stunned silence until he looked at the glass and said, "That went better than I expected." I reminded him she had thrown a bottle at my wall. He still believed she would not interfere again because repeating the routine risked another exposure. I wanted to believe him, but the scene had left me shaken. We cleaned the glass, photographed the damage, and saved the message history. I did not plan to publish it, but after watching her deny visible evidence, I preserved a clear record. For the next 3 weeks, my mother did not contact me at all. There were no calls, texts, or surprise visits, the longest silence since I had moved out. Part of me hoped the confrontation had forced her to examine her behavior. That hope ended when my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called me. She said my mother had been staying with her since the fight and was telling everyone a completely different story. According to my mother, I had brought home a gay friend and pretended he was my boyfriend because I was jealous of how much attention he gave her. She claimed I had designed it because I could not tolerate men finding her attractive. Carol told me she did not believe that version, but my mother had already contacted relatives, friends, and even people connected to my workplace. She was also posting vague messages online about family betrayal, ungrateful children, and daughters who could not handle having attractive mothers. She never named me, but everyone knew the target. She shared articles about narcissistic children abusing their parents and received dozens of supportive comments from people who had no idea what had happened. I spent the day answering relatives. Some believed me. Others mistook her wounded confidence for truth. It was the same strategy she had used with my boyfriends. Establish herself as the reasonable, mistreated person before anyone else could describe her behavior. I called Adrian in tears and said I could not fight her because she was too skilled at controlling the story. He reminded me that her version contained its own contradiction. If she wanted to play the innocent victim of a harmless prank, she also had to explain why discovering that Adrian was gay had humiliated her so deeply. He advised me not to post the messages unless necessary. I calmly told close relatives what happened and let them examine her story. The turning point came the next day when my cousin Megan called. She said, "If Adrian was only your friend and your mother was only being polite, why was she embarrassed?" Megan reasoned that the truth would not be humiliating unless my mother had behaved inappropriately. Other relatives began asking the same questions. Why would I invent such an elaborate plan if my mother had never interfered in a relationship? Why had she demanded a meeting to discuss romantic feelings? Why had she moved into Carol's home instead of dismissing the episode as a silly misunderstanding? What had she said or sent that made the truth devastating? My mother could not answer without admitting that her interactions with Adrian had been inappropriate. Within a week, the family's view began to shift. I did not need to publish every message or defend myself in every conversation. Her account collapsed because innocent behavior could not explain her humiliation. The more she insisted she had done nothing wrong, the less logical her outrage appeared. Once the immediate chaos settled, I began dating again. I met a lawyer named Grant through a friend at work. I told him early because I no longer wanted a relationship built on hoping my mother would behave. On our third dinner date, I explained that she had spent years sabotaging my relationships and that I had eventually asked a gay actor to pretend to be my boyfriend so she would expose herself. Grant listened and then said, "That is either one of the most intelligent solutions I've ever heard or one of the most unhinged." I admitted it was probably both. Instead of backing away, he laughed and said it showed creativity and problem solving. He understood that the issue was whether her attention could create secrecy, competition, or doubt between us. Grant was different from the men I had dated before. He was confident, established in his life, and comfortable setting polite boundaries. I waited 6 months before introducing him, giving our relationship time to become strong enough to handle her. When the dinner finally happened, my mother attempted a restrained version of her usual routine. She gave him a lingering hug and began asking detailed questions about his career and family. Grant smiled and said, "It's wonderful to meet Natalie's mother. She talks about you often." Whenever my mother tried to monopolize him, he redirected the conversation toward me. If she mentioned my college major, he asked me what had drawn me to it. If she offered an opinion, he thanked her and then asked what I thought. He never embarrassed her. He simply made clear that he was my partner, not an available audience. By the end of the evening, my mother looked frustrated and confused. Her usual tactics had nowhere to land. Grant did not respond to the flirting, hide conversations from me, or allow her to define our relationship. After that dinner, she made a few dismissive comments about him being fine and warned me not to become serious too quickly, but the private texts and aggressive pursuit never appeared. 2 years later, Grant and I became engaged. When we announced it, my mother said, "Well, I suppose he's acceptable, though you are both very young to make such a large decision." I was 27 and Grant was 31. Her criticism was almost comforting in its predictability. She could still minimize my happiness, but she could no longer insert herself between us. My mother never admitted what she had done to my earlier relationships. Even after relatives questioned her, she maintained that she was the victim of a jealous daughter's prank. Strangely, that refusal became part of the solution. Because she was committed to portraying herself as innocent, she could not risk behaving openly with Grant the way she had with Adrian. Sending photographs or coffee invitations would undermine the story she had defended. Her narcissism trapped her into better behavior. She had not developed empathy. She had learned that repeating the pattern threatened her image. Wedding planning brought a new set of challenges. My mother tried to influence the venue, photographer, catering, and flowers. She argued that the event needed to be larger, more expensive, and more photogenic. In the past, she would have charmed my partner into helping pressure me. Grant never allowed that. He thanked her for suggestions, and then calmly said, "Natalie and I have already chosen the menu," or, "That's an interesting idea, but we're happy with our photographer." He did not fight or leave me to manage her alone. He treated us as a team. For the first time in my adult life, I had a partner who was not only immune to my mother's tactics, but willing to close every opening she tried to create. The wedding was beautiful. My mother behaved appropriately for most of the day, though she wore a dress that was arguably more attention-grabbing than necessary for the mother of the bride. Grant's family welcomed me, and everyone seemed relieved that the old drama had not reached the ceremony. During the reception, my mother gave a surprisingly sweet speech. She said she was proud of me, happy that I had found someone who appreciated me, and pleased to welcome Grant into the family. For a moment, I wondered whether she had changed. Then the bouquet toss began. My mother placed herself in the center of the single women, caught the flowers, raised them over her head, and announced, "It looks like I'm next," while winking at Grant's unmarried brother. Some parts of her were permanent. Grant and I have now been married for 3 years, and we have a 1-year-old daughter named Lily. My mother is obsessed with being a grandmother. She babysits twice a week, buys Lily more clothes than any baby could possibly wear, and posts photographs of them together whenever she has the opportunity. Sometimes I catch her studying Grant, as though wondering whether she could still attract him. Then Lily laughs, reaches for her, or does something cute, and my mother immediately redirects herself toward the easier reward of being adored by a grandchild. It is not a cure, but it redirects attention away from my marriage. Adrian remained one of my closest friends. He and Daniel married last year, and I stood beside them as a bridesmaid. My mother attended as my guest. At the reception, she tried matching Adrian's friends with women, forgetting the fact behind our confrontation. At one point, she leaned toward me and whispered that I should introduce a tall man across the room to my cousin Claire, because they would be perfect together. I reminded her, "Mom, they're all gay. This is a gay wedding." She looked at me seriously and replied, "You never know. Some people experiment." All I could do was laugh. She was still charming, beautiful, self-absorbed, and almost completely unable to see the world from another person's perspective. But she could no longer destroy my relationships, which mattered more than an insincere apology. What I learned was not how to fix a narcissistic parent. I do not believe I fixed my mother at all. Confrontation gave her material to rewrite, and being a better daughter never earned respect. The real change came when I stopped measuring success by whether she understood my pain. I chose a partner who recognized her manipulation, refused private alliances, and treated our relationship as something worth protecting. I created boundaries that did not depend on her agreement. Adrian's plan did not transform her personality, but it exposed her methods and showed me that I was not helpless. It also taught her that pushing too far could cost her control of the narrative. My mother still insists she did nothing wrong with my previous boyfriends. She still calls the Adrian situation a jealous daughter's trick, and I no longer argue. She knows Grant will not respond to her tactics, and she knows what can happen when she crosses a line publicly enough that other people begin asking questions. That knowledge has been more effective than an apology. I once believed I had to change my family before I could be happy. Now I know happiness can begin when you accept who someone is, protect yourself, and stop giving them authority over your relationships. The fake boyfriend plan worked because it changed me. It taught me to take control, protect myself without completely cutting ties, and refuse the victim role my mother wrote for me. Our relationship may never be healthy in the way I once wanted, but it is contained, my marriage is safe, and my life is finally my own. For me, that is close enough to a happy ending.